here. No guarantees at all about anything. Right. And, you know, I can see that there's a thing here called resume, which I'll come back to later. Because I think that may be the issue, but I'm not assuming anything. This is exactly how I debug and try to. Now I see that I've gotten that error coming back now. So invalid conversion of function. So here's what I do. When I see something like that I really kind of clueless about, yeah, I might go ahead and I copy this, and then what I do over here is I just put a comment and I paste, because all of this stuff, no one will be at the top. It's not helpful. It's nothing to do, you know, no one outside of me cares about that. And then what I can do here is I can just take this and Google it. So let's I say Google, but I use whatever search engine. It doesn't matter to me. And right, and I just want to see, since this is such a common thing, right? Swift invalid function. I'm just looking for something as closely related as I can get. Yeah, here's a request, a URL. Here's the shared data task, right? And here's the problem. They're saying, note, the completion handler right here. So it should be something like this. URL session shared data. I'm trying to read that right there. Oh, so they're saying that, well, this is using the shared data throws. Well, that's what their complaint is that if you're using some JSON decoder, that no, their complaint, it seems like the complaint is that that it's not expecting a throws. You're trying to use one thing that throws with something that doesn't accept the throws. So I think that's what they're trying to say. But it's kind of strange because I'm not, like, the only thing that I'm doing here is using this URL. Let me look at this URL, which is just a struct. Yeah, so like when I read it and I'm looking at it, it says invalid conversion from throwing function, which throws and returns a void, to, which is a function that takes 3 parameters, throws and returns a void, to non-throwing function. So this is a non-throwing function that doesn't throw and takes a void. So invalid conversion. That's weird because the information we're getting, and sometimes I just comment stuff out as well. Let me just comment this out for a second. The information that we're getting here is information that's coming from the compiler. Right? So, and then sometimes they'll have a little bit of yeah, so sometimes they'll have a little bit of information about the issue. So what I'm seeing here is that the complaint has nothing to do with this method right here, because I just took away the only other thing that's causing a throw, which is this method down here has a try, and I noticed that they were saying something along similar lines here. So the suggestion was that you could try doing this kind of thing, where you do a try catch, or you do a if let try with a question mark. So I have an if let try with a nil, but I'm sorry, I had this right here, which is an if let at that try. I don't know whether that's going to be happy with that or not, but I could see, oh wait, and then this is JSON serialization, and now we're using the JSON decoder for the most part. And then user self from the data. Okay, so a couple of things have happened. So JSON decoder is newer than JSON serialization. This is JSON serialization we're using here, where we're trying to look at the data and get a JSON object back, and then trying to take that JSON object, pass it into a comic info. And I created an initializer for comic. I created an extension to my comic info. That's also in my data store class. I created this to be able to create a comic info item, which is, that's the same name as my model name. If I click on this and show you the class, you'll see it's my NSManage object. Okay, it's automatically generated, so you don't have to edit. You cannot edit this class. That's why I had to create an extension. It's automatically generated by the system when you use a model X, when you use that XC data model class, you automatically get this comic info. So anyway, I created this part because I was thinking about how do I convert that number. Remember I said, okay, I'm going to take a number. The month is going to give me a number, but it gives me the number as a string. So this is how I convert that. And this is how I extract the month and turn it from that string into a number. And this is how I take the link that comes in as a string and make it into a URL. That's the kind of thing. So, for example, I have to do this. So I'll come back to that. So, but the issue that we're having here is that the error is being generated up here, but in fact the error comes from down here. So actually this part right here, I think I can just comment this out and just try handling this using the new method. So the new method would be just taking something like this, what they're trying to say, a JSON decoder from data. Let's try that. So if I say and then it's going to be comic info item, and then this is from the data, and it's an if let. So I open that up, and let's see if it'll be happy with that. It may or may not be. Let me make sure I have that. Yes. So I just usually, like, if I'm not sure about an object because it's like the color here is wrong or the color's white, then I would try to look at different things. Ah, I see. So it could be the problem of, so this person had suggested that we try something like that to, so that this would not throw an error. And let me see here. I think this is a simple unwrapped kind of thing. So what I could do is I could say something like, this is just complaining about this data object here, which is optional data object. So what I need to do obviously is before I have to say if I have some data, let's call it my model data. I'm weird like that. Just call it model data is equal to this optional data. Then I want to do this, then do the rest. So I just wrap that inside here and say, okay, if I actually have model data, don't go inside unless I have model data. And then over here, it's complaining that this is optional instead of a, non-optional. So you can't use an optional. Basically, what it's complaining about is this decode method. If I look at it, if I can get it to show up correctly, this decode method requires that if I look at the quick help for a second, trying to get it to show you the problem. Okay, so it's got a decoder, and it's a decode method. You have to put in this item, and then you're pulling that from the JSON data. So I think this ought to work right here where we just say model data. And so now, and then if not, I'll try and figure out why. So does not have the, oh, it doesn't conform to decodable. So that's the thing. I've been, I used, this is kind of mixing in two different strategies here where you have a core data object. And so that's why I had, you have a core data object versus this thing called, they moved over from how to deal with core data. We used to have to just get the JSON data and loop through it and set the properties, which is what I was doing earlier. And this JSON decoder bit is talking, there's a thing called codable, which is just a new way, a new method that's supposedly easier, and it is easier. If you can see here, it says struct grocery product codable. So it's easier to create and work with than core data. But, you know, I like the advantages of being able to create that core data model. And we have this new library that we were just looking at that also, you know, works with core data. So there's a lot of ways to handle it. I could do something like this and use that as my data model instead, where you just make a struct that's codable and then follow along and use this code to get to convert between JSON and your model. That'll work too. But then you'll have to, you still need to be able to store that model somewhere, you know? So my thinking is I still have to store the model in core. I still want the SQLite database. Core data just stores in your information in SQLite database. So I was like, you know what? I still want the information in the SQLite database. So I've really got to think about how I want to do things. I certainly could make, like I could go ahead and try to make this codable. Just, you know, it's not that hard. It's just codable. But I think that there's, I think there are other considerations as well. So like if I change this from NS object and just say it's still an NS object, manage object, but now make it codable. I think there are other like considerations. Matter of fact, I'm not supposed to edit this particular file. So I'll just go to my extension, because that file is going to get created automatically. Let me just see if I can't find my extension. So over here, I'm just typing extension comic, and that's enough. I'll just search for it. And then so over here, of course, I could say something like codable. But then it's gonna then I'm gonna have other errors that require me to make this thing codable. You know, so then I have there's more work. So every time you make a decision about anything, you're gonna be impacted other things, which is why I didn't go this way, which is why I tried looking at the JSON serialization as the way to get the data out. And so that's why I put it on hold for a minute, because it was getting a little too complicated. So, but you know, so this pretty much, if you look at these two statements, you'll see how I went from this idea here with JSON decoder, which is a new thing, and it requires your object to be codable. But my object is not codable. It's NS manage. You know, I have my reasons for not, you know, the codable part. To make it codable and NS manage object is going to be a little tricky, a lot tricky. And so what I normally would do is I'd have an NS manage object, I'd have a JSON, and I just create that JSON, take the properties, I'd loop through the properties and get the key value pairs out of it, and then assign those key value pairs to the comic info. And that's what I was doing over here when we ran into this terrible error. This the bad compiler told me I did something wrong. And so here,